Last week, there was a massive change to US import policies that has just killed off a lot of dropshippers. Should POD sellers be worried? By the end of this video, you'll be crystal clear on exactly what's going on. So I'll be explaining the timeline of tariffs and looking at exactly how the major POD suppliers are affected, including showing you actual price changes from my own sales between last year and this year to give you an idea of what to expect. So I guess the more alarming question, if you look closely at some of the popular US POD suppliers and where they source their blank products to print on, that's right. So are we going to expect problems here? Keep watching to find out. And lastly, what should current POD sellers and people considering selling POD do in light of this information? Make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you find this video helpful, and let's get started. Now, this is all very confusing, so let's get up to speed with what's actually happened to date. So before 2018, for Chinese imports to the US, pretty much all products you could sell with POD and dropshipping were duty-free. So like AliExpress dropshippers and other people shipping directly from China to the US had no customs issues. Obviously, there were other issues with dropshipping, like very long shipping times, but nothing customs-wise. In mid-2018, the US-China trade war began, and then some tariffs got put on some categories of Chinese imports by the Trump administration under Section 301 of the Trade Act. And these tariffs were around 7.5 to 25%, a lot of which were on apparel, accessories, home goods, all the popular dropshipping products that people were selling at the time. So this was a massive problem, right? Because by itself, that would easily be enough to wipe out dropshipping profit margins, especially with the rising cost of Facebook ads at the time. But actually, no, it wasn't, because of something called the duty-free de minimis exemption, or Section 321, which was a customs rule that allowed small shipments with customs value of less than $800 enter the US without any duties. So at this time, dropshippers actually had an advantage, and anyone bulk importing had to even split up their orders into chunks less than $800 to not pay the duties. So shipping directly to customers from China, which is what companies like Temu and all the AliExpress dropshippers were doing, was the cheaper option, and this carried on through Biden. And after Trump began his second term in February, they announced these blanket tariffs for the first time. So that means tariffs on all imports from a country, not just specific categories. For example, this was 10% on all imports from China. And for the first time in February, they threatened to actually suspend the de minimis exemption, but there were massive issues with that, as you can imagine, so they didn't end up going through with it, to the collective relief of all the Chinese dropshippers. And then if you guys remember, in April, there was absolute chaos, Liberation Day, when they threatened these huge tariffs on everyone. The stock market tanked, there was retaliatory tariffs from all directions. These were never actually put into place. Stock market went back up, and Trump basically just rug pulled the entire world, in my opinion. But that's the SEC's business, not mine. Anyway, the outcome of all this was that in May, they agreed to a tariff of 30% for Chinese imports, which it currently still is. Now, this is just a temporary agreement, and the rates could increase in the future, which is important to remember. And this all led up to the most recent update, which is the complete removal of the de minimis exemption on August 29th of 2025 for all global imports. Even those under $800 are now subject to tariffs or flat fees. So that means even if you're selling like a $3 sticker into the US from any other country in the world, you now have to pay duties on that. Now, previously, most people who bulk imported into the US would use private commercial carriers like UPS, FedEx, and these carriers already had something called electronic DDP, or delivery duty paid systems, which is technology that lets sellers prepay duties, and it makes sure the customer isn't charged when the parcel goes through customs. And for these commercial carriers on August 29th, they immediately just started charging the 30% tariffs for parcels under $800. It wasn't a problem for them. However, most dropshippers, print-on-demand sellers, small business owners, they ship low-cost items using the International Postal Network to skip customs entirely, and they don't pay these brokerage fees that the bulk shippers using these commercial carriers do either. But now, because de minimis has been removed, they can't do that anymore, and USPS does not collect duties on small parcels, so it's up to these individual international carriers in each country, for example, Royal Mail in the UK, handing off the shipment to have the automated DDP systems in place for their US shipments. And many carriers just don't have this yet, and they need the time to set up this software and all the processes properly. So to help them do that, the Trump administration announced a 6-month transition period that ends on February 29th of 2026. And during this period, if one of these carriers doesn't have the DDP systems yet to collect tariffs, and they can pay a flat fee of $80 to $200 per parcel to customs instead, which obviously they're going to pass on to the seller. So what does that all mean? Well, if you sell small value items directly to US customers from abroad, from any country, you need to use a carrier with DDP systems in place. So what's the situation with the major POD suppliers and their carriers? Do they have the DDP systems in place yet? Before we move on, I want to tell you about today's video sponsor, .store domains. If you're a creator who wants to start an online store on your own website, you'll need a special web address called a domain name. Think of it as your website's very own ID on the internet, for example, Rihanna.store, Shopify.com, or Behance.net. The ending parts of those links, .store.com or .net, are called the domain name extension. It's a unique tag that sets websites apart and is a quick way to indicate what type of website someone's looking at. If you're running an online store, a .store domain is a great choice for you, because a website that ends in .store tells your customers right away that they've stumbled on an online store and switches their mental state from browsing to buying mode. A .store domain isn't just about getting more visitors. It also makes your store way easier to find, and it's no wonder that many big names and brands, including Ronaldo, Michelle Obama, and Rihanna, and even Discord, have chosen a .store domain for their official online store. And if you're starting a brand from scratch, 9 times out of 10 a .com domain is already taken. So instead of changing the name of your dream brand and settling for something long and clunky, why not add .store after it instead? Not only do you have a much bigger choice of available names, you're also letting customers know that they're on an online store immediately. Problem solved. A study done by Contrast Digital last year showed that a site with a .store domain had a cheaper cost of acquiring a customer and a higher conversion rate with Google Ads, and more than twice the organic impressions of a similar .com store. So if you want more clicks and more sales, a .store domain is perfect for you. Cash is tight when you're starting out, so .store domains have a program called Elevate.store to help all online sellers with discounts of up to $2,500 on e-commerce tools. And right now, they've got a special limited time deal just for my viewers. You can get your .store domain for just 99 cents for the first year. Use the link in my description and the code TIA, that's TIA, to get this offer and grab your own .store domain today. Big thanks to .store domains for sponsoring this video. For Printify sellers, if you're selling from domestic US-based providers like this one, at first glance, you should not be affected, right? However, the more interesting question is, if the domestic US supplier sources from China or internationally, what happens then? But we'll get onto that. Now, if you're selling a product that ships into the US internationally, like this one, and it's sort of more rare products that is harder to find a US supplier for, it's not just like a t-shirt or a mug, then you might face some issues. Luckily, some of the Printify fulfillment partners already offer DDP shipping options, so there's going to be no added charges, just some possible delays with all the friction of the switch. And that list includes the Chinese provider as well, so that's good to know. But the delivery could take a bit longer than usual because of all the extra steps and processes. Even though most of these facilities are slowly making the switch to DDP carriers, I would highly advise against listing items only available from non-US providers, such as this one, to the US market anymore. Like, whatever market advantage you gain from offering a product that nobody else sells, it's probably not worth facing all the issues that could come with it in this current US political climate, because, as I said, like, Trump could increase the tariffs, but obviously you can still sell these to the rest of the world. I'll touch on that later as well. The real question is, will there be problems for US suppliers that source their blank products from China, such as this one? Or this one, which is one of the most popular products on Printful, also sourced from China. Will there be issues because of the recent changes? Well, the answer is no. And in fact, this is actually a good thing for POD sellers, because if you remember, the de minimis loophole only applied to orders of under $800, and everyone that imported over that amount from China, including all of these US print facilities, were already using commercial carriers with DDP systems anyway, and they were paying these tariffs to import their blank products, most likely via air freight, which they're going to use carriers like FedEx or UPS for from China. So no issue there. So that means while all the AliExpress and Temu drop dropshippers on places like Amazon, and especially using Facebook ads, are basically not going to be able to sell for the next 6 months because most of their carriers don't have DDP, and they're not going to be able to pay $80+ handling fee per order. POD sellers are safe and actually have less competition, especially with Facebook ads, because of this. So fantastic news. But regardless of de minimis, tariffs have increased for bulk imports. That is a fact, and a lot of these US POD providers, as you've seen, source blank products from China and overseas. And if you remember, the tariffs increased from 10% to 30% in May. So has this caused price increases for sellers? Well, this is going to depend on your product, but let me show you a few examples from my own sales just to give you an idea of some of the price increases. So to explain what's going on here, these are all US orders that I've placed to states with no sales tax to avoid complicating things. And for each column, it shows the cost of the same product just 1 year apart. And as you can see, it's really not very much, 15-cent increase here. And one product I sell is actually decreased in price from last year. You gotta love that, massive credit to Printify for absorbing the cost of this product. So bottom line is, POD sellers, keep selling and don't let this tariff craziness deter you. So what do print-on-demand sellers actually need to do? Well, if you plan to sell to US customers, you should switch to a US provider if at all possible. And if you use restricted providers, so the ones that are not on the DDP list, which are these for Printify, then yes, you will have to pause selling those to the US for the moment, probably around 6 months. I mean, they say they are working on DDP for these providers, but honestly, guys, just sell products available from US providers to US customers. It's really that simple. Now, what about other POD suppliers such as Printful? Well, the difference between Printful and Printify is that Printify is a network of individual suppliers, whereas Printful is a company that has its own production facilities. So if you're selling anything to the US, they probably just ship it from their North Carolina or Texas facility already, so not much to worry about there. But anyway, here's what the email says. So this is just explaining the de minimis situation. And again, there's no immediate increased cost to you, and they are working on the DDP situation as well. If you're currently looking for POD supplies to the US or otherwise, I do have a list of the more trustworthy suppliers that I've researched, the networks and their fulfillment locations, so that I'll link down below to download for free on my website as well, tiatx.com. So overall, pretty good news for POD sellers as long as you're using providers that make sense. But I just want to remind you guys that if you are feeling a little bit stressed about this whole situation, the US is not the only country that exists. Take a look at all the countries that I've sold to on Etsy and Shopify. Very international customer base. These are some recent traffic stats for my Etsy store. Even though Etsy is a US company.com, right, the market is hugely international. The UK, Canada, Australia, Europe, they're all very big markets for Etsy, and the UK sales actually make up a lot of my revenue nowadays. That portion of the pie is getting bigger and bigger as POD in the US gets more competitive. And yeah, obviously there's like VAT and a bunch of European taxes, but the people that live there are used to paying them, and you'll be surprised at how much extra shipping people are willing to pay to get a product that they want. There are some new EU regulations, but it's actually pretty easy to deal with. If you want to know more about selling safely to Europe and worldwide, watch my previous video on that. I'll link it in the description. Best way to diversify your business with just a few clicks. It's not that difficult. So I hope that was helpful, guys. I mean, I know this is a confusing topic for a lot of people, but I hope you understand better now, and I'll see you guys in the next video.